page 206 to 207 says, quote, "Doctrines are not God. They are only a kind of map, but the map is based on the experience of hundreds of people who really were in touch with God." He expounds on this, but I was racking my brain on what we really were going to focus on with these chapters, because most of them are about theology as a whole. Who is God? How does he separate into three beings? Stuff like that. I already know what to focus on, predestination, but because we've talked about it so much this semester, but we finally have C.S. Lewis's perspective on it, so it'll introduce new ideas we can all kind of discuss, not necessarily against each other, but mostly about him, right? But I do not mind discussing something else if you're sick of predestination. I have other topics, but before we do that, we need to cover some of what C.S. Lewis actually talked about in this chapter. So the first chapter is making and begetting God. Or making and begetting. Yes, making and begetting of God. So can you guys, off of what you read in the first chapter, kind of define for me the making and begetting of God? Just if you remember some of the principles we covered in the first chapter.
How theology is like a map, and it says merely learning and thinking about the Christian doctrines. If you stop there, it is less real and less exciting than the sort of thing my friend got in the desert. Doctrines are not God; they are only a kind of map, but the map is based on the experience of hundreds of people who really were in touch with God.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I read that and I like the example. Can you expound upon that just so I have a better understanding on it?
I feel like maybe when he mentions like the experiences of like where you've been, maybe like as far as like your walk with like God or something, rather than like a book laid out for you and like a theology book for you. I don't know.
Yeah, that makes sense. You guys have an input? Because I mean, that was my exordium, was that doctrines are not God, they're a map, I mean, that makes the experiences versus just them kind of being laid out for you. You guys have anything to expound upon that? Because it's a complicated principle.
Almost like people who have experience of like God's like blessing and His prosperity, rather than learning it in a room and not feeling like having that same effect of experience,
Mm-hmm. The difference between just being told versus actually having knowing what it feels like.
Yeah.
Because what is a moment that you guys actually did when somebody's been explaining to you this your whole life, and you kind of understood it, but then you finally did?
Yeah. I absolutely agree with this quote about like how you can like go to like Bible school and study something, but unless you experience like the power of God, like you're not going to be able to like.
Yeah, what's a moment that happened for you like that you personally that you really did like realize, oh my gosh?
Probably like this past year, just like deciding like what college I was going to go to.
Yeah.
I could have like studied Jeremiah 29:11 and believed that Jeremiah 29:11 finding the plans that I have for you, but like to really experience that plan, and it was different than reading it rather than like actually touching like me and like just experiencing that in real life.
I mean, that makes sense. You've been told your whole life that He's got a plan for you. He's going to take care of you. But then when you finally have to make a big decision, He's there alongside you.
Because you can like study scripture all day long, and it cannot sink. Like it doesn't have to sink in. You can just be saying it.
Yeah.
So I think that's really good. Now, as far as him using the example of the map, I don't really understand that part, but like I understand everything else.
I do see like the way he's using map is like it'll get you through those obstacles of like confusion in the
Yeah.
Bible. Like there's so many people would say, I don't think about predestination or free will.